All right, guys. It's 10 o'clock. We are in the last day of the Dev Summit. Friday morning. Everyone's feeling good after the party last night. No permanent injuries. Everyone made it back okay.
Getting tired.
Getting a little tired? Everyone getting a little tired? Yeah. Been a good week. Well, this is a session really about you, about developers, folks that are using ArcGIS Runtime and our technology. We want this to be kind of an open session, basically, where you guys are able to ask questions, any question you'd like. There's no dumb question. If you're looking to discover anything that maybe you didn't discover earlier this week, or you want a little more detail on some of the technology around ArcGIS Runtime, feel free to ask a question in this forum, in our GeoNet place, for this specific live Q&A. Or feel free to reach out, as I mentioned before, and we can enter the question for you. We've got a couple of microphones, so if you guys want to be able to broadcast your question too, if you want to ask it here verbally. I'll just repeat again that if you're trying to get into our GeoNet place here for this live Q&A, if you need some help, we have some GeoNet experts up here in the right-hand side of the left-hand side of the auditorium. Michelle and Chris are over here on the side of the room. We can refresh? Okay, cool. Fortunately, I'm joined by a panel of runtime experts up here, red badges, with all the answers. And so I'm not going to dominate here. I'm going to hand this off. We're going to share the wealth. Actually, here we got a couple of microphones. We can start hitting a couple of those questions. So feel free to get them in. We'll get them in as they come. Should we start with the first one that's listed? Can you comment on timelines or plans to adopt Metal and Vulkan? All right, Ewan, our CTO is going to take this one. Good stuff.
Yes, we are actually working to support these more modern graphics architectures, and we're hoping to have Metal support available in our June release, or sorry, not June release, August release, update 6. It'll probably be in beta because we're not 100% sure if we'll get it done for July, but the team's making good progress, and they're basically overhauling the internal graphics architecture. We have a abstraction layer that we sit on top of DirectX, OpenGL, OpenGL ES, and we're overhauling that so we can add in Metal is the first one, and then Vulkan will be the next one that we do. So Metal definitely this year. Hopefully in the summer. If not the summer, it will be at the end of the year. Vulkan will be next year.
Next year. Cool. Good deal. Any follow-up questions on that one, guys? Is that good? Timelines match? Hopefully? Okay, good. Nice. Good stuff. All right, great. Thanks, Ewan. We got the next question here on, actually it's not a question, it's just a statement, actually, which is great, little accolades. Thanks for the additional samples, having the SDK samples in the Play Store. Kind of interesting on that one. Maybe, Devesh, you want to talk a little bit about our plans around the samples, actually, and put them in the store, making them available?
Yeah, so great. Thanks for acknowledging that. We do a lot of work on the samples, making sure we share the source code, but we realize not everybody has developer machines set up to start playing with the new technology, and sometimes they don't even know what runtime is. And the best way to find out is to download the samples app and start playing with it and seeing what capabilities are available. So I think right now we have samples for iOS and Android native SDKs in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. But some of the other SDKs also pre-built their sample apps and make them available on arcgis.com as a portal item, so you can download the executable and just run them on your machine. So yeah, continue to give us feedback. If there are things that you don't find or the samples that you don't see, then let us know and we'd be happy to add them.
Great, good stuff. Yeah, thanks, Devesh. Great. Yeah, great to see actually having the samples in the App Store, or having the samples available, compiled and downloadable and usable have been fantastic to be able to get folks who maybe don't have a development environment or don't have, or just want to be able to see what the capabilities are in runtime. Easy way to get it on their device and see it working. Next question, snapping, baked into runtime. I'm going to go to the bottom first, then I have to go back to the top. It looks like we're ordering here is a little different, so we'll adjust that here shortly. Snapping baked into runtime. Interesting, I think in previous SDKs, previous APIs, we've had some snapping capabilities that have been built in, very simple snapping. We've received a lot of feedback at this developer summit about needing some simple snapping tools built in. And so I think we're going to have to revisit, maybe take a look at what some of the capabilities are there that we need to be able to support. Is the person that asked this here, actually? Oh, there we go, snapping. So any details, or are you using a model for what you'd like to see as far as snapping in runtime? Like, is it previous SDK? Is it Pro? Yeah. Just basic snapping tools. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's great feedback. Actually, we'll take that. Actually, it's the first question, but we'll get this one off the list. Is React Native on the radar? You want to talk?
React Native is not on our radar at the moment. However, Morton did a quick Google search and found a GitHub repo that somebody has created a React Native for the Android SDK and iOS. It's available on GitHub. The project's 3 years old, so it might take a little bit of updating. But you can do it. Somebody has done it, but we're not planning on posting anything from the runtime team.
Gotcha. I'll mention that we've had a couple customers that have written their own wrappers. Some successful, others not. But it's not something that we plan to pursue anytime soon. But obviously, looking for feedback on what you guys intend to be able to support going forward. We'll jump to the top. Is there an Android version of the open source data collection app on the way? Yes, there is. Is someone that asked this question here? You did? Oh, you did too. Okay, good stuff. Have you looked at the data collection apps that are available out there now? The one for iOS, .NET? Yeah, I gotcha.
Probably within a month.
Yeah, it'll come out here shortly. Yeah, within a month, yeah. So we're planning on closing that gap. It'd be great. Have you used the iOS or .NET application? Okay, you've got to go Android.
I just want something to help our Android developers get
Okay.
familiar.
Okay.
We do iOS primarily, and it's just it's been a great sample.
A great way to start out. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, it's great to hear. It's great to hear. Let's do a quick refresh before I have to start telling stories about last night. Ooh, here we go. Good stuff. Is there a limitation that is preventing the edit of mobile map packages, geodatabases, exported from Pro, non-sync enabled, or was this a conscious decision? Are there plans to allow this in the future? I could answer this all day. You want me? Okay, good stuff. Yes, this desktop workflow. Actually, we're looking at being able to support this. Technically, there's no reason why we couldn't do this, actually, today. It's just a matter of being able to light this up responsibly. And so if we enable this capability, we want to make sure that we've tested those workflows, make sure that we're promoting a proper workflow. Initially, in this case, what we'll probably be looking at is something similar like what you have with a shapefile, right? So you can actually edit, share shapefiles much like you can with a mobile geodatabase. The interesting thing here is that if you go beyond that simple workflow of just being able to edit a single file, or an individual feature class in mobile geodatabase or any content within it, at some point there's going to be a request to be able to synchronize that information in some context. And so being able to provide tooling to think through that full workflow is something that we'd like to be able to provide at some point. At least there's a plan for that.
I can add a little bit more.
Sure.
So it was a conscious decision that we didn't support that workflow. And as Rex said, we could have enabled it, but then you would have been making edits out in the field. But then how do you bring them back? And ArcGIS Pro doesn't recognize a geodatabase that's stored in a SQLite container today. But that is on their roadmap, so that when ArcGIS Pro understands a geodatabase stored in SQLite, that's probably when we'll light it up, because that way you can take your content out to the field, you can edit it, and then you can bring it back into Pro.
Right, that's good. Actually, you might need to hold on to that one. I think that might be your mic. We're good. Just in case. All right, working up from the bottom here. Let's go. Restricting map view to specific map extent using runtime. Is there a way to restrict the map view using a certain map extent in runtime? Anybody want to take this? Any thoughts? Right. So right now, as far as I'm aware, it's a programmatic solution. There's nothing that's currently within the map definition, map specification that actually does this, but we'd like to be able to add this in a responsible way again, so that it's not something that just Runtime recognizes, it's something that's recognized across the platform. And so we're looking at ways to be able to introduce this, so that when you publish from Pro, or you create a map on with the map viewer, or you create a map in general, that you have the ability to advertise a maximum map extent. So we're looking at ways to design and maybe make that light up. Devesh, you want to have a little chat on that one? Okay, good.
I'll just add on to that. So if the question was specifically about preventing zoom out or zoom in to a certain extent, that you can do. There are some properties on the map for min scale and max scale that you can set, and it'll prevent the user from zooming out beyond those scale ranges. But what Rex was saying is true, is that if you want to limit them to within a geographic extent between those scales, we don't have that capability yet. It's something that we want to do and allow you to specify an extent beyond which they can't navigate out of.
Right, yeah. Key is it's on the roadmap. We're just trying to do it responsibly at this point. So it's good feedback to know that folks are looking for this and waiting for that capability. Oh, I can just read from here. All right, next one. What are the best practices for styling maps in ArcGIS Pro and making sure they translate over to runtime? Is an effort being put in to make sure there's consistency? Specifically, what is the timeline for supporting scale-based sizing? So you, and I think you might have answered something similar to this earlier this week. Yeah. Yeah, go for it. Give it a run. You've had time to refine that answer, right? So yeah, this is good.
Ultimately, we really want your maps that you author in Pro, we want them to look exactly the same inside of the runtime application. And we're making progress. There's more work being done in Update 5, which is out in 2 or 3 weeks' time, to close that gap. Both Runtime and Pro are built on top of the cartographic information model. They are completely different technology stacks, and that's where the subtle differences come in. And so Pro will add capability, and then the Runtime team has to kind of catch up on that capability. And sometimes their interpretation of the cartographic information model is slightly different than Pro's. But the way that we treat these differences, they're bugs, and we need to sync them up. And so if you are seeing differences in symbology, we do want to hear from you, because we want to close that gap. So we are actively trying to close it, but sometimes we'll miss something, in which case submit the issue and we'll address it. The one area where we will not be able to close the gap is to do with dynamic text placement through a labeling engine. So the Runtime's labeling engine has been developed to be very functional, but also very performant, running on mobile devices, all the way through to desktop computers. The ArcGIS Pro labeling engine is based on Maplex, which is very functional, but it doesn't perform well enough on the mobile devices for us to bring it into these mobile devices. So we developed a new labeling engine. It has a subset of the rules. It doesn't have all the rules. And so label placement is going to be different. Something that we're talking to the ArcGIS Pro team about is actually adding the Runtime labeling engine as an option inside of Pro. So if you're authoring maps for use within the Runtime, you can turn on the Runtime's labeling engine, and then your text placement will be exactly the same in Pro as it is in Runtime. If you really want absolute control and certainty about where your text is placed, we would recommend you use annotation, which is coming in Update 5, which is 3 weeks away. So then your differences, again, will reduce.
Great, yeah, good stuff. Kyle, any follow-up on that, actually? There's a couple of questions nested in that one. Was that good? Good stuff. Where's Kyle? Yes, nice, good stuff. All right, we'll do a quick refresh, see what we got here. All right, after taking a layer based on a feature layer view into a map, adding features to it during the editing workflows doesn't validate against the view's definition expression. Is this something being looked into? I'm not looking into it. I'll tell you that. Anyone have any feedback, any experience with this? We might need to take a deeper look at that one. So Paul, yeah, so I was going to ask a follow-up. Paul, are you here? All right, Paul? Yeah, what are you experiencing? What's happening now?
So if you click on it, put a little detail on the comment, but the general concept is you can define a feature, for example, say I have a data set that includes all the world, but then I create a view that's restricted to New Zealand, bring that into a map, and then during editing the workflow, of course, as I understand at the moment, a user could create a feature, say in Australia or the US, and it would make its way into the data set, even though technically speaking kind of it's a bit weird because that view was restricted to New Zealand. So validation in that sense, so that the view has a definition that exists, but adding features to it doesn't do a validation against that.
Okay, so it doesn't check. Actually, you're finding that it doesn't check.
When you do your checkout, or is it online or online? The question is general for both, I guess. Okay. If you do it offline, you can specify you can spend at least 10 to 5, I'm not sure about 100. If you try to create a feature outside that extent, you specify it will take it. Okay, good point, but thanks. But also, actually, accuracy too.
That's good, yeah. Okay, yep.
I mean, that's good to know that
it is.
It's about attribute based on attributes. But, I mean, we've had those cases even outside of feature service views. So you could just have a simple feature service added as a feature layer and set a definition expression in the map to filter it to show only certain features. So now the user can only see those features, but they can add any feature they want. So I think that same sort of mechanism is translated into using feature service views that may limit what you can see based on filters or attribute expressions.
Probably a distinction there that the definition expression applied client side implies they have permission still to see everything or create everything, versus if someone, obviously the author of the view, has said, well, actually, I'm restricting it based on this attribute or spatial query or whatever. They're kind of implying that that person shouldn't be able to see that or shouldn't be able to create it. They're kind of, from a security perspective, they're implying that you shouldn't be able to override, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. We could definitely.
The definition expression is, it's not placing a restriction on the data itself. It's just, it's more about the viewing of that data. But what we are working on, and we're doing this as part of our broader work to support the utility networks, we'll be supporting attribute rules. And with the new attribute rule engine, you can have very sophisticated rules based on, for a feature to say, this attribute's got to be a certain value, or this attribute has got to be a certain value if this other attribute is set. And it's all based on arcade scripting. And the idea is there that the rules, some rules can be enforced every time the feature gets edited, but other rules don't. And there's a process when you run validation on your data set, and it analyzes all the attribute rules and then applies them. That concept is being built into Pro right now, and it's coming to the runtime later on this year. So that would be an opportunity for you to potentially restrict users from setting certain values. So you wouldn't do it through a definition expression. You would set up attribute rules, and then you'd run these attribute rules at the end of an editing session, and that's when it would be validated.
Good. So something to look forward to, actually, when we introduce that geodatabase concept. It's great. Ooh, a flurry of activity. Very nice. All right, we're going to go here. So currently, Runtime can use arcade expressions that are defined for styling and visualization, rotation, label, applicability. Is there a way to evaluate these expressions outside of this context, an evaluation engine, or plans to expose one? I believe the arcade site has a way or a mechanism that you can use arcade, which is, of course, not linked to a specific technology. Maybe Devesh has more info.
Yeah, the simple answer is you're right. We do support arcade in labeling, we support in symbology, we also support in pop-ups. So if you configure those things with arcade expressions, we'll evaluate and show you the right thing. We currently don't have any firm plans to expose the arcade engine as an API to you as developers where you can evaluate any expressions, but that is, I think that's what you're asking this question. But that is something that we could do and we would consider doing at some point. So that you can evaluate any expressions. I think Ewan was talking about using attribute rules to do validation. Those are also based on arcade. When we support attribute rules, we will make sure we evaluate those rules in the runtime. But as far as developers wanting to evaluate any expression on their own, we'll have to think about exposing an API for that. No plans yet. Just to answer a little bit more than what the question asked, I mean, the arcade expression language is constantly evolving. They keep adding new features. And I think there were a couple of new features that were added late last year that Runtime still doesn't support. The most important one was using feature sets in arcade. We'll be looking to add those shortly, hopefully in the summer release, but definitely in 2019.
Good stuff. You could hold on to that, Devesh. Good stuff, nice. Keep it close. Data schema changes workflow. Looks like we're going to drill in a little bit, okay. Follow-up from last year is the new, better workflow for allowing enterprise geodatabase schema changes to propagate to hundreds, if not thousands, of sync-enabled mobile apps. The gallery. All right. Was this question asked last year, AJ? Did you get an answer last year?
Yeah, there is not.
Okay.
Same answer, not one now. And in fact, if there's a follow-up question of being able to redefine the extent of the replica, also no.
Okay, so another arcade expression support. Was the time frame for allowing arcade attribute validation rules? Okay. So Ewan tackled this a little bit earlier. We're looking to support that towards the end of the year. Additional capabilities as part of our utility network workflow, but a geodatabase concept that we'd like to bring in.
I'll just add on to that, Rex, for a second. So there's two parts of that story. One is evaluating the rules on the server when you sync your edits up to the server. That should happen as soon as you have a service that supports it. Runtime doesn't need to do anything special. If those validation rules need to be enforced offline on the client, that's where Runtime needs to add more explicit support for that, and that's in the future.
All right, can we get samples on the best practices for developing unit tests using Runtime and .NET Standard? All right, Morten, first question of the day for you. Good stuff.
Yes. It's funny enough, I was actually realizing that the other day too, and I started on it yesterday. So I will have one up soon for one of our demo apps to have some unit test. You can't really unit test .NET Standard because you need a runtime to run it against. You need to run it against .NET Framework or Mono on iOS and Android or UWP. So you actually so you can't really do just by .NET Standard, but you can use it with some shared code, and I'll show that in the sample how to do that, so you can test it that way. So yeah, I'll post a link to the repo where it'll go. Hopefully I can finish it up next week and have some samples of some unit tests up there.
Good stuff. Chris, any follow-up questions? On that, you're good? Cool.
If you want to see what I have so far, just come up and see me after. I can show you what I have.
Great. All right, feature layer performance enhancements. just left a session where they discussed 10.6.1 and newer 4.x JS API enabling much faster feature layers by downloading lighter payloads using quantization. Does this apply to runtime? Yes, it does. It's something that we can take advantage of, and we're looking to do that this year. So we'd like to take advantage of that. Feature tiles, yep. Any follow-up on that, other than yes, we want to be able to? Do you need additional details on how that's going to happen? Are we reassurance that it's coming, something we're going to look at? Good stuff. Yeah, good question. What's my pathway to getting a Revit building model into a format supported by the AR/VR runtime beta? Can't find the documentation for the AR/VR beta, but I need to get a 3D building model from Revit into a demo app. You said ask anything. We did. I think we have an answer for you. So we have there's a new concept that's been introduced, or it's being introduced within the ArcGIS platform, concept of a building layer. And the origin of that is generally from a Revit model. And so the building layer, think of as a group layer. And that group layer contains a variety of different components. One of those could be a scene layer package, could be features. But the components of a building layer are types that we support in runtime. So while we don't support the model, the building layer model yet, the pieces or the parts of that that make up that quote-unquote group layer are things that we can consume within runtime today. So if you're able to create a building layer from Revit using Pro, the output from that is actually something you can consume directly within runtime today. The model that goes along with the building layer is not something that will come across. There'll be some manual work there. But the capabilities that allow for you to access the components of that building model are in runtime today. So, yep.
Yeah, so the ArcGIS doesn't support reading Revit data directly and consuming it inside of our applications. It's a conversion process. So you take your Revit model, ultimately it's being converted to a scene layer, and then you can consume that scene layer in anything that supports these scene layers. That's exactly what you saw on the plenary. Joe took the Revit model of the museum down in Christchurch in New Zealand. He converted it to a scene layer, and then he consumed it within the JavaScript API. So once it's converted, you can then consume it inside of ArcGIS.
Right. Currently, you can use models as marker symbols in a scene view that are on your disk and defined in an open format. Are there any plans to allow in-memory definition of these models? In-memory definition of these models. You think construction on the fly? Is that the question? Like being able to create these models from within? Is that right? Okay. As far as I'm aware, there's no plans within runtime to do that, but there are other APIs that allow you to work with or manipulate models in a context that as you deem fit, depending upon the model format that you're using. We use the ASIMP library for being able to read the model. So anything that works in that context that allows you to change it at runtime would work here too. Yep, that's good. Cool. Okay, are there any plans to improve performance when doing spatial search, attribute query on local geodatabase feature layer? What do you think, guys? Uh-oh. Lots of looking away. What's is there a specific issue that's cropping up with this specifically? Stefan? Actually, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's actually, we did comparisons on certain local geodatabase feature class, and iterating through doing spatial search, attributive search, using runtime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
4 seconds, and therefore would be really great.
Okay. I know of one situation that was reported in the timeline for update 5 that we resolved that significantly changed or impacted performance with respect to getting results back when comparing 10.2x to 100.x, which brought them into sort of into sync with one another. That's something you'll find in update 1 or in update 5. That's one that I'm aware of, but then I know there's a number of things that we try and chase down. It's a sort of a constant process of optimization, refining, and making sure that we can continue to support the best performance we can going forward. So I guess as we move on, as the product continues to be enhanced going forward, as we continue to add improvements and refine, you should see this get better over time. All right, follow up on the data schema changes question. What is the recommended best practice? Best practice for managing that? Is there at least any way that runtime can detect schema changes and alert the user that they need to remove and re-download a new offline copy? Yeah, the answer is no, actually, at this stage. So that's a manual process at this point. Anything you want to add, guys? Nope, at this stage. Okay. Good feedback, though. Something we'll need to think about. So if we have the session next year, hopefully we'll have a...
Actually, that has come up a lot this week, and questions about what's the best practice for syncing data, what's the best practice for supporting large numbers of users going offline, and I think probably we've spent a lot of time answering specific questions, and I think next year we'll actually have a session on optimizing your offline workflows, because just an issue came up that we spent some time talking to the user about, and they have a reasonable number of users coming back in from the field on a daily basis, and they're calling sync when they get a Wi-Fi connection, and there's maybe about 30 of them, which isn't a lot, really, and you'd expect the sync to take about 2 or 3 minutes. But it was taking 25 minutes. And what's actually happening, they were doing a bi-directional sync, so they were pushing changes to the server and pulling changes from the server back down to their clients. What actually happens on the back end is when you're doing that pull changes down, we have to get an exclusive lock on the database. And so 25, 30 users were basically waiting for an exclusive lock on the database, and they were all waiting on each other, and it was taking such a long time. When in reality, what a better workflow for that organization would be, at the end of the day, just push your changes to the server. Just push them to the server, and don't worry about pulling them down. When you come in the next morning to start your work, have a pre-planned area ready to go, and just pull that down on your machine. And it would optimize the workflow significantly. So it's information like that it's hard to find in our documentation. We need to improve that. But I think it's definitely something we want to work on and sharing out the sort of best practices for building performant offline workflows.
Yeah, it's great. Actually, it's Ewan hits on a good point here. We think with the prevalence and the use of runtime expanding and a lot more sort of sophisticated solutions being built, we're thinking about next year offering more advanced sessions, actually, at the Developer Summit to dive into some details, patterns and practices, tips and tricks, really for optimizing some of these workflows. Does that sound like a good idea? You guys, we're good yet? We got a lot of, okay, good stuff. That's great. Great to see it taking hold, so that's great. Okay, setting maximum extent to constrain map at a given extent is not possible. Center on the map cannot go beyond a boundary extent. Available only in previous version of runtime. Yep, exactly. So you have it nailed there. This is kind of what we talked about before. It's a programmatic workaround today, but we're looking at, as we mentioned before, rolling this out in a responsible way so that we can not just publish, but also honor this experience consistently. So we're working with other client teams like Pro and JavaScript to make sure that when this gets introduced, that we introduce it in a consistent way. So it's great feedback. It's something that we need to do. It's certainly on our roadmap here that we'd like to tackle. We just need a little bit of design, actually, so we can get something done.
Yep. I'll add a little bit more to this. I don't know if any of you have ever written an Arc reader some customization. But Arc Reader in the publisher extension allowed you to set a whole series of properties on your published map, which Arc Reader and the Arc Reader API would honor. And one of them was the area of interest, the maximum extent, to stop people from panning and zooming out of that area. The publisher team is looking at enhancing the publisher extension that now ships with ArcGIS Pro with a number of the enhancements or a number of the features that was in the ArcMap publisher extension. So that's data locking, encryption, restricting the extent of view. There's a number of things that the team wants to work on. And when they do that, if you create a package with the publisher extension and restrict certain aspects, Runtime will honor these restrictions. And so you can use the publisher extension to then deploy packages to your Runtime applications, and then Runtime will just honor the restrictions that are part of that, that extension. And that's work that's ongoing with the publisher team.
Right. Anyone here use Publisher? Brave souls? No? Good stuff. Great. So yeah, Ewan did hit on something that we're looking into, obviously with the Publisher extension through Pro. A couple things some features that we're looking at, which is obviously enabling password protection, expiration, encryption, actually. So a lot of the different capabilities you might expect with being able to deliver a data package responsibly. All right, any chance we'll be able to sync domain changes to an offline geodatabase? Oof. All right, you guys aware of any work in this area? Unfortunately, that's a short answer. No, right now.
Yeah, the sync framework is specifically on changes to features, attributes, and geometry. It's not designed to support changes to the schema of your database, and it's not designed to support changes to cartography that's associated with the features. Although that has come up several times this week.
Do you know that adding values to unique value renderer gets significantly slower the more values are added? I have code back at the office for demonstrating this. Thanks, Troy. Anybody aware of an issue? Do you think
just to follow up on that, is that the rendering becomes slower or just setting up the renderer?
Just setting up the renderer, adding the items to the unique value renders list. It's slower. It took us a few moments to figure it out why, but there's like one comment. Once you get over like a couple hundred items in the renderer, it takes like over a second to add each item.
Which
what
SDK?
API are you using? Okay. We'll have to look into that. I mean. All right. Yeah. Obviously, we did not know.
It's good to know. There we go. So another thing I'll probably mention here too is that all of these questions are out in our public forum in GeoNet. We're gonna take these back to the office and try and iterate on these so we can get some answers that we can publish up here too, so that at least we can make this official. We'll probably be putting these questions in their appropriate places, actually within GeoNet, so that they make sense, actually, with respect to the product. So, of course, there will be a follow-up on this, too. It's not a one-and-done experience.
I will just add and say this, that the rest of the platform only allows you to add 3 fields to your unique value renderer. Pro prohibits you from adding more. Feature services don't let you publish anything with more than 3. Runtime, we've allowed developer affordability to add more, but we look into it, so.
I've heard conflicting information about this subject, but does Runtime support .NetCore, or will it?
Yeah, so we actually, during the conference, talked about that we do intend to support .NetCore, but not until .NetCore 3.0. .NetCore does run on Linux and Mac and various IoT ARM devices and stuff. We do not intend supporting that. We're looking at supporting the WPF SDK on .NetCore 3.0 once that goes live. Currently, the schedule for .NetCore 3.0 is second half of 2019. So it's very vague. So Probably won't make it into update 6, but we'll see how that. We'll know more dates in May at the Build conference. That's so far what they announced. So it kind of depends on time when we'll support that, but it'll be a Windows-only thing. It's not something we're currently looking at to support across platform. But it's definitely something we're looking at. There's a huge bunch of benefits we see with running WPF and .NET Core over the .NET framework.
Good stuff. Yeah, thanks. Anyone here want to use .NET on Linux, Mac?
Was anyone asking for it for the one you run, I guess, during ASP.NET on different platforms? So was that the reason, or just the WPF piece?
I think that guy just left. Actually, he wanted to. We just missed him. We just missed him.
Yeah. So yeah, Windows only, but we do intend to do it.
Yeah.
And just a quick follow-up on that, and this is really more a question for Microsoft, I'm sure, but WPF is never intended to be cross-platform.
No. They're very, very clear in the forum, and a lot of people are asking for it, and they're very clear saying, no, we're not doing that. So yeah, it's too tied into the whole Windows under subsystem, so I doubt that'll ever happen.
I just wish they would upgrade the DirectX engine it's running on.
Me too.
You're in good company. All right. Is subsurface navigation supported for local as well as global scenes? Ooh, interesting. So right now, Runtime only supports global scenes at this stage. So we are looking at being able to support local scenes going forward. There's some work there that needs to happen on the Runtime side to be able to accommodate the variety of different coordinate systems that would be appropriate for a local scene. But it is obviously on our roadmap. It's part of the platform, the ArcGIS platform, and so we'd like to be able to support that. Right now, because we only support global, the subsurface capabilities that are coming in Update 5, of course, will only work with global at this point. I should probably mention that there's no difference between online and offline. So the same capabilities are available offline as well. So, performance problems with freehand sketch using Sketch Editor for .NET. Ooh, shakedown. Here we go. Performance problems with freehand sketch. If you're drawing fast, the path of the sketch line doesn't follow the pen's movement. Performance is worse with a finger than a pencil. And we've got is that a tough book? Is that what that is? Panasonic FZG1? Yeah, it's on the tough book. Latest version of Runtime, Windows 10. Only workaround right now is to draw really slowly.
So we had someone on the island mentioning that too. They were seeing something like this, and we weren't really able to reproduce it right there. So I wonder if there's something going on that device or something that's causing those touch events to get skipped.
We did cross-check with other
Yeah.
apps very to the law that they really performed well. And it doesn't matter if you do it with the finger or with the stylus, it's the same. It's really not good.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, WPF has always been inherently poor at touch because it runs in the UI thread, whereas, for instance, with UWP, they have it off thread. So I don't know if you might be hitting something, but if maybe we can talk after and see if we can get a reproducer up and see if there's something we can do. I'm a little worried there's a limitation of WPF and not just our stuff, because we don't really do anything special and just react to the events. So, but maybe talk after. Great.
Problems with touch and WPF are pretty well documented.
Sketch Editor undo command. In some cases, the undo command does not undo the previous operation. We fix it in 100.5. Ooh, there's a link to another forum thread. Interesting. Should we open that one and see what's going on over there?
I can take that. It's fixed. We'll be out in a few weeks.
Nice. Look at that.
It's the .NET one, at least. That's been fixed. Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Nice. Okay. So fixed. Done. There we go. Are there plans to add more query parameters, options to runtime that are currently only available in the REST API, such as return distinct values? Keith, anything in mind? Anything specific? Anything you guys would like to see that you don't currently have? Keith, are you here? Oh, there we go, Keith, there we go. Anything specific that, that you're aware of that you'd like to see?
Well, one thing that I have to do whenever I want to get distinct values, I just have to write a rest column there rather than using a query in a service feature table.
Okay.
And it's possible to do that, but
Right. You'd like to have it part of the API built in. I gotcha. I think we supported this in 10.2, actually, if I recall. So maybe something we need to mop up on an equivalency thing.
Yeah, we've been adding more of these to our query parameters. I think we added support for statistics and count, so we'll get to distinct eventually.
Okay.
Does that apply to the offline query, ArcGIS query in general?
Yes, those parameters apply to both.
Yeah. So we'll just confirm. We need to make sure that's in our backlog. All right, we're getting short here. Oops. There we go. All right, guys. Anything else of interest? Any questions about our roadmap, maybe? Anything going forward? Additional capabilities you're looking to support going forward? Oop. I got a splinter last night. I think it was from trying to go through a wicker chair, actually. I just realized that, sorry.
I've got a
There we
question
go.
for you. I've got a question for you. Would you like more geodatabase functionality in the API? For instance, would you like to be able to create geodatabases, define feature classes in the API? Yes. Okay, that's good.
That's good.
We're adding it, so
That is good.
that's good. What other questions do you have, Rex?
Oh, let's see here. So anyone building 3D applications right now? 3D, just a couple. We got 3, 4. Another one? Okay. We'll get to that one in a second. I just want to, with respect to those 3D applications, is there something that you see in other parts of the platform that you want to be able to take advantage of in runtime that's just not there yet? Anything that you've seen? Yes?
back to that original one, editing the non-sync enabled mobile map packages.
Okay.
We've got some workflows where that would be helpful. It's easy to turn that on. I know we talked about that.
So we could turn it on. As I said at the start, we made the conscious decision not to, because the next question would be, well, I want to bring these edits back into Pro, and that's a much bigger nut to crack. But we could turn it on, and with the explicit knowledge that you can't just easily bring these edits back into Pro.
Is Pro a workflow that you're expecting to use? It is not.
Okay.
Okay. No, that's good.
We talked about it earlier in the week.
Yep.
It's a place to store kind of ephemeral data. Just as
Yep.
But it has to be a full-class feature that you can
Right.
do geometry engine stuff with and that kind of thing. Right now, it's just looking at a dictionary for that kind of thing. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, we should consider
Yeah.
probably Pro 2.4
4.
In the summer. We could enable that.
Yep. Yeah, it's good. It's great feedback because I think those workflows are becoming more common at this stage as runtime becomes more prevalent. So let's see. Attachments offline. Is it possible to not include them on initial download, but then selectively download per feature as requested by the user into a local geodatabase table? I believe this is possible. Is it not possible? Really? It's not possible? I thought we did some work on that. Okay. Interesting. What's that? It's a good ask, yeah. I thought maybe it was just a discussion about trying to make this happen. So
We do continue to make sort of improvements and optimizations for the offline workflows. A lot of that is driven by you, or it's driven by our own internal apps team. And that's what's driving, for instance, the overrides that you can now place on your offline downloads. You do have quite a bit of fine control on what comes down, and this could just be added to that bucket of it's an optimization on the workflow. So
right.
we could add it to the list.
Yep. Like I said before, we'll go through this list and try and synthesize or pull out things that we can include actually and try and focus on for future work in runtime. Do you just want us to send snippets of our absurd workarounds and the reasoning behind them for feedback to y'all? Good stuff. With the answer there is yes. Actually, I think, is that right? Yeah. Maybe not absurd. You know, you have to work around. You're developing things. Sometimes that happens, right? Until we can get things that we are more formalized actually into the API. So it's good to see what you guys are doing to try and solve some issues that we'd like to resolve for you. So.
But it is really important that that you provide us feedback and you tell us where things are not working, and use GeoNet to do that, because we're all developers. We tend to not to just accept something as not working. That's just a challenge for us to work around it, and we all do that. But it's important to tell us when things aren't working, even though you've got an absurd workaround that you're very proud of. Please tell us that there's a problem so that we can fix it for everybody else. So use GeoNet and use that. That talks directly to the developers here, and all the teams monitor the GeoNet forums a lot, and there's a lot of bug fixes that happen just because you've entered an issue on GeoNet. We probably fix more issues that are logged to us through GeoNet than we do through support.
I think this last release, that was the first time we fixed more and reported through GeoNet than support,
Yep.
right? Yep.
So please, you may think you've got your workaround so you can move on, but take the time, write up the information into the GeoNet post and post it, because the team does read them.
That's great. All right, another question to the gallery, while we're waiting for another question to come in. Anyone looking at using runtime in a service? Anybody want to use runtime in a service? Interest in that area? No? I'm sorry, what was that? So using runtime, ArcGIS Runtime capabilities, so for example, .NET, built on .NET Framework, if you want to be able to put that into an ASP.NET Web Service and host it for access by multiple users, actually. So some technology that we've released in the past actually has supported this. We don't right now in runtime. So, yes?
We kind of studied that out and then backed it out because we heard that license-wise it wasn't good to run runtime.
Right. So there's two parts to that. One is licensing, right? So we don't want to cannibalize other server technology that we deliver. The other part is we don't test it, right? It's not really designed for that. So I think what we are looking at right now is maybe ways to provide runtime capabilities, but in a sort of a lighter, some more responsible fashion, in the concept of, or in the context of a service. So, but we're really looking at that point is feedback on, well, what do you need to do? Obviously, we're not looking for folks to rebuild map server. We're looking at ways to, for maybe being able to expose some of the operational logic that runtime has. So for example, a geometry engine, or working with serialization, right? Features to from JSON. That's what we're looking at maybe making available. Of course, this is really a different license, actually, because it's not single user. The license doesn't travel with the user, it doesn't travel with the app. It's actually, the license itself needs to be able to accommodate multiple users accessing the same logic, right? So we need to think about the license model for this, because it's not what we have in place today. So specifically what you started to spec out, what was the, how did you lay that out?
Mm-hmm. Very convenient to use it as like an intermediate data storage to get data from one place to another.
Okay.
I think it's, effectively started out as kind of a crutch for us, but it works really well.
Are you thinking like a web tier storage, or is this more of a mechanism for retrieving and then injecting?
Take data in a point in time, shove it into like a mobile map package, and then transfer it off to someplace else.
Okay. So you're thinking feature management and manipulation, basically. Okay. Okay. That's good to hear. It's good to hear that. All right. New question. It would be a nice feature if it would be possible to take a 3D model from Blender as a scene symbol and colorize it with a custom color. For example, by replacing transparent color by a custom color. Do you see this chance for this implementation in runtime? Nice. I think we talked about this earlier, right? Nice. Adrian has been quiet tonight. Let's bring Adrian into this conversation. There we go. What do you think, Adrian?
It's actually something I tried to do 2 weeks ago for a demo I was working on. But there's no plan to support it right now because we use an external library to import all those models, so we don't have full control of what that library is giving us. But if that library improves, then we might have the option of be able to change that color and have more control of what we're doing on the 3D model.
All right, I agree that would be a nice feature, actually. All right, guys, we got a few minutes left. Any, I'm sorry? Is there a new one? Oh, here it is, I see it, yep. Is there a way to be notified when a feature service has been modified? So a notification, sort of a, yeah.
There isn't out of the box, but you could write something on the server to do that. You could have a server object interceptor, which could detect the change in the feature service, and then you could even use the new webhooks to fire an event out. But there's nothing built into the platform, although that has come up a couple of times.
Yeah, push notifications. Just
notifications in general has
Yep.
come up actually a few times this week. And we're definitely starting to think that we need to provide something as part of our infrastructure that allows notifications to be sent.
Right. As opposed to a sort of a polling mechanism
Yeah.
that happens now, right? Yeah, good question. Oops, gotta go back. All right, guys. All right, we're tailing into the end of the hour here. It's been a great Q&A session. A lot of great questions, guys. I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up at this point. Unless there's another question. Yep, exactly.
Is able to change the spatial reference of geodatabase in using Runtime?
Are you able to change the spatial reference of a mobile geodatabase?
Yes.
Of a feature class within a mobile geodatabase?
Yes.
Okay. So when the feature class within a mobile geodatabase has a spatial reference, there's different ways to change that. There's not a way within Runtime to do that across the board. You'd have to basically manipulate the geometry itself. You could use our projection engine within Runtime to do that. But then you'd have to rewrite the data actually at that point. Desktop local server. Interesting. Okay. So if you decide to go with, are you working on, what platforms are you using?
We're using Windows.
Windows, okay. So there is are folks familiar with local server? Yep, okay. So local server is a technology that works on Windows and Linux. Think of it as sort of a mini ArcGIS server. It supports map feature and geoprocessing services. There's a mechanism or there's geoprocessing capabilities that are available within local server that you can access within Runtime SDKs that are supported on Windows for your solution.
You see, I can modify it in one kind geodatabase, basically SQLite based.
Are you trying to change the spatial reference of each feature? Or are you trying to...
You could write code
Yeah.
to rip through the features.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could edit the features themselves and you could change the spatial reference for the features.
Or the whole feature class, right? How about the whole feature class?
Right, can you change the spatial reference on the feature class? Do we advertise? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not, you'd have to create a new feature class. To be able to do
Why
that.
are you trying to do that? Are you trying to use the geodatabase in a map that has a different spatial reference? If you're just trying to do that, view it in a map that has a different spatial reference, you don't need to change the spatial reference of the geodatabase. The runtime will reproject the data when we draw it into the map.
So so dynamically, of course, are you looking to be able to sort of optimize so that you don't have to reproject, or?
The issue runtime is you are not able to create brand new geodatabase in the runtime.
Right, right.
So we are trying to work now this issue. We're trying to just create some data structure, in the shapefile.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we need to
Right.
able to bring into the database, but we have a different user in a different area. Like using different spatial features.
Okay. I gotcha. So one part is that we already have a projection engine built into runtime. So we'll be able to, the map spatial reference, if there's data coming from a different spatial reference, all that will be reprojected appropriately so it'll render in the proper space, right? Of course, there's a cost to that. So I think maybe what we talked about a little bit earlier was the ability to, if you need to be able to change the spatial reference for all features within a feature class, you're creating a new feature class at that point. And then basically ripping through the features and projecting at that point into this other spatial reference. I think part of the work that we're looking at being able to do later this year, which is enabling the runtime itself to create a mobile geo database and then create feature classes within it, that might be something that, as part of that effort, you'd have conditional logic that would allow you to basically reproject and basically pump those features with the new spatial reference into that feature class. If you're looking just to do that within runtime. Runtime natively, if it's something that you want to be able to do today within runtime, then that's where a local server might come in as a solution. But again, that's it's an add-on actually to runtime that's supported on Windows and Linux. So, yeah. Yeah.
In that same vein of local server, AirDOS, Lizard Tech, I know we talked about last year that there were plans to make that like a native part of runtime, being able to read those in without local server. Are there still plans to do that?
So in update 4, we did add support for Mr. Sid imagery, right? So natively, so across every platform. There's been some recent work here on GDAL, actually, a component that we use to be able to read raster data within runtime. We've upgraded to basically the latest release, the latest version of GDAL. We're now participating with the community as well too, so we're able to both provide and get feedback. What that does, or what that will offer us the ability to do, is to enhance some of our raster capabilities going forward. So if there's a variety of raster formats that you're interested in working with that we maybe haven't supported in the past, or we've required local server to use in the past, we'd like to get that feedback, because obviously GDAL is pretty extensive as to what they can work with. We only support a subset of that right now because it's something that we certify. But we'd like to obviously entertain any additional raster formats that you need to be able to support natively. So we'd like to get that feedback. It'd be great. Yeah. All right, great guys. I think we might be out of time, but thanks for the hour, guys. Hopefully we got some good answers here. We'll go ahead and follow up on these after this and make sure we get some things written down. Again, hope the rest of your Friday is great. If you're going to the closing session, have a great time. It'll be good stuff. Thanks again, guys. Thank you. Yeah, good stuff.